Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy.
Hey friends, welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Carrie.
I know we've said it before, but this one is a doozy. Are you ready?
Oh, we haven't had a doozy in a while.
Yeah. I mean, this one is a truly horrifying case. I know that they all are. They're all tragic and sad, but this one is especially heinous, and it's about vigilante justice, which is kind of something that we haven't touched on yet and wanted to cover
Yeah.
this one. So we often see people taking the law into their own hands in movies and TV shows. John Wick and the Boondock Saints, Equalizer, Dexter, Arrow, A Time to Kill, etc. Like we've all seen it 1,000 times. And these fictional characters are often hailed as heroes for righting wrongs or correcting injustices, and often their actions are celebrated. But vigilante justice can go horribly wrong when people react based on fears or emotions instead of facts, or just based on partial information, which can just lead to even more tragedy. Unfortunately, this case is about premature vigilante justice, which really led to no justice at all.
Oh
So,
boy.
this one, like I said, is extra heavy and tragic. So, I hope that you are drinking something strong, Carrie.
So it's too hot today for bourbon, in my opinion. So I am drinking long drink today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a
Nice.
citrus something or other. It's fucking delicious. The perfect thing on a hot summer day kind of thing. What are you drinking?
Well, I am not going the warm day route, and I'm drinking a Bloody Mary.
Oh shit, yes you are.
Yeah, it sounded so good, and we've had this Bloody Mary mix just haunting me from the top of the fridge, and I was like, "You know what? Today's the day." It just sounded fucking good, but the spice isn't adding to my body temperature levels. Or it is really adding, I guess I should say, but it tastes amazing. So, cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers, my friend. Yes.
Yeah.
Clink.
Clink.
Mm.
Mm-mm-mm. I am going to start by telling you about a place called Cathedral Canyon.
I'm intrigued.
So, Cathedral Canyon is a unique little spot in the desert that sits about 50 miles west of Las Vegas near Pahrump, Nevada, which I
Stop
have a
it.
hard time not saying Pahrumpa Pum Pum,
I
but it is. A little drummer boy just comes right in.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I if I was anywhere in that general vicinity, I would want to live there.
Yeah. You would just have a snare drum all the
I
time.
know. Welcome to town.
So, this land was once owned by Roland Wiley, who was a prominent Las Vegas attorney, and he bought about 14,000 acres of land in the desert
Wow.
in 1936. That is a ton of fucking desert.
He had a vision.
Yeah. And in 1972, Cathedral Canyon became his passion project that he would work on in his spare time. He built a suspension bridge that spanned the canyon's like 100-foot width and a staircase that led from the top of the ravine down to the canyon floor. He put in statues and benches, walkways, artwork, and even installed a pump fed waterfall.
Can I clarify something? So you
Yeah.
said he bought it in 1933?
1936.
And he started improving on it in 1972?
Yeah, I think it was like his retirement project. So he just kind of had it and would, go out there and
So
work on
he's
stuff. But then
just
once he retired, he
dripping
was like,
with money.
yeah,
Who
that
does,
would be
who
my
buys
guess.
14,000 acres of desert land and sits on it for 40 years? Yeah.
And then is like, you know what? I'm going to put all my money into jazzing it up.
Wow, okay.
He ended up putting in bathrooms and a lighting and sound system, and he really had big hopes for it becoming like this big outdoor sanctuary and open air cathedral. Thus, obviously, the name Cathedral Canyon. It became a popular site for church services and other events like art shows and trail rides, concerts, Easter egg hunts, shit like that. It was just kind of a cool place to go do things like that. And there were even placards with poems and inspirational quotes tucked in along the path in the canyon. So it was just like this cool place. You
That's
just kind of
neat.
wandered around and found stuff. And at the top of the canyon, there was actually once a sign from Wiley himself that said, quote, "It is my hope that this cathedral under the skies will give you a set of new eyes and a whole new way of seeing things," which
Wow.
I think is just really fucking cool. Roland Wiley died in 1994, and unfortunately, the maintenance of Cathedral Canyon diminished over time. I think that there was
Mm,
somebody that was taking care of it, but it just kind of everybody aged, it just kind of diminished. And so, what was once a popular roadside attraction where people could wander around viewing all of his little treasures is now a rundown, damaged, it's littered with trash and vandalism. But the area itself is still incredibly beautiful and peaceful and will still draw nature lovers and hikers. But that little spot that was just this nugget of inspiration and whatever is no longer what he intended for the space, which is unfortunate.
bummer.
So, with all of that being said, on August 1st of 2021, a man named Michael Ward was sleeping in his car in the Cathedral Canyon area. And he had gone out there for a few days just to kind of explore the area and enjoy nature and the quiet. Instead of setting up a camp somewhere, he had chosen to just sleep in his car. And sometime in the night, he was woken up by gunshots, which wasn't super surprising since people would often go out there and use that area for shooting practice, but still alarming to be woken up by gunshots. So once the sun started to rise and he could see better outside, he decided to walk toward the canyon and kind of, investigate and see what was going on. When he arrived at Cathedral Canyon, he saw two men standing over something. And at first glance, he thought it was just maybe like a rolled up carpet, but he was too far to make out what it was. As he walked closer, he was able to see that it was actually a bloody, naked body.
Oh,
When the two men saw Michael Ward approaching, they ran off to a vehicle and ended up, just driving as quickly as they could out of the area. He, of course, then called 911 around, it ended up being like 6:20 that morning, and just in a total panic, he was like reporting that there was a body out there and tried to give the best description that he could of the men that he had seen.
yeah. I mean, come on. Like, that's like, you're walking around, you come around a corner, you see that. Like, no one in their right mind is ever expecting to see something like that.
Well, yeah, and
Like,
it's like this
ever.
poor guy because he went out there intentionally for like the zen experience and to just
The
get away
beauty
from
of
the
the beauty.
craziness,
Yeah.
and then stumbles upon this awful fucking scene. So
You know what? Fuck those guys. They ruined the Zen.
sheriff's deputies were dispatched, to the canyon where they discovered the deceased body. And so, using fingerprinting analysis, the victim was identified as 27-year-old Roy Jaggers from Las Vegas, Nevada. So, Roy was the son of Cassie Robinson and Jerry Jaggers, which is hard to fucking say. He was incredibly close with his parents, and he and his mother, Cassie, lived together in an apartment in Las Vegas. She had some health issues, so Roy had moved in to help her out and care
Mm,
for her and just be there to help her out. Sources often referred to his parents as a couple. I'm not sure if they were still romantically involved, but they didn't live together. From what I could
okay.
tell, Roy and his mother lived together and his father Jerry lived somewhere else. But regardless of their relationship status, they loved the shit out of their son.
So, regardless, they were great co parents at the very least.
And so Roy had previously worked as a general contractor and an electrician, but that type of work had slowed down almost completely during the COVID pandemic. Like it basically
Oh,
came to like a screeching halt. So he was having to rely on other types of work. At the time he was killed, Roy had been working at a convenience store.
okay.
He loved playing video games, watching anime, hiking, teaching, and participating in martial arts. He studied Tai Chi and had a black sash in Kung Fu, which
Wow.
I've you don't hear of many people like studying Kung Fu, but I think
Uh
it's
uh
fucking great. And he loved music. He played the saxophone since he was a kid, was
Wow.
and loved it. Yeah. He was known to be just a very kind, positive, loving, and was really passionate about the things he loved. He also desperately wanted to fall in love and share his life with someone.
Oh,
Like
that's
he,
adorable.
yeah, just was like
Oh,
such a kind man and wanted to find someone to be with. So Roy was friends with one of their neighbors named Heather Pate, who was the same age. She was also 27 and lived in the same apartment complex.
okay.
So Roy was initially interested in Heather romantically, but the two ended up just becoming good friends, which
Oh,
is
okay.
great. Heather was a single mom who had two young sons. They were 3 and 4 years old, and she was in the middle of a pretty nasty. She was in the middle of a pretty nasty custody battle with
Ooh,
her boy's father. So that's never
okay.
great.
No.
Roy was a support to Heather and would often help her out by watching her sons or taking care
Wow.
of her dogs if she wasn't home. He would even make dinner for Heather and her kiddos and would help her out with like cleaning and laundry and other just household duties. Just he sounds like such a sweet man.
Yeah.
And he, by all accounts, really enjoyed hanging out with their sons and seemed to be a positive role model for them, especially in the middle of this custody shit that was going on. So Roy was a good friend and support for her. And I'm only assuming, but maybe it gave him a little practice for the family that he really longed to have.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but sure. Yeah. He was getting some fulfillment out of it too, and it was helping her. It was a very symbiotic friendship.
Right, exactly. But Heather was dating a man named Kevin Dent, who was 36 years old. Dent is a convicted felon who had been released from state prison just 8 months earlier after pleading guilty to child abuse, battery constituting domestic violence, and resisting a public officer with a firearm following an incident in 2019. He also had misdemeanor battery charges prior to that. So
And she was actively dating him,
just a gentleman. Yes. Yes. They were
and she had two
officially
young
together.
children.
Yes.
And did she know this information about him?
Oh yeah. Yep. There was no mystery about that.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
To each his
So
own, I
anyway,
suppose.
yeah. So this fabulous couple wanted to go out for a night of drinking and playing pool on July 30th of 2021. So Heather was like, "Hey, Roy, would you mind coming over and watching the boys so my dirtbag boyfriend and I can go out?" And Roy was like, "Absolutely." And so he stayed at her apartment with her sons until she and Kevin returned home around 5 o'clock the next morning.
Holy
That is a
moly.
lot of fucking pool playing. And if you ever ask me to babysit and you roll in at 5 o'clock in the goddamn morning, I'm going to be pissed.
That's fucking rude, man. It's rude. It's rude. So clearly, she's taking advantage of his kindness.
Yeah. And maybe Roy didn't care. Maybe they were like, "We'll be home at 5. We'll be home right before the sun is
Maybe.
rising." According to later testimony from Heather, she said that she had received a message from Roy sometime that night while they were out, asking where she kept the melatonin in her apartment, which,
Okay, for the a little is having a hard time sleeping, maybe?
yeah, it didn't give any details as to what the context of that question was, but I know plenty of children who sometimes need melatonin
Yeah,
to go night
100%.
night. No
Yep.
big deal, and especially if mom's out. A lot of times kids will take advantage and try to stay up later than their bedtime, whatever, it is what it
Yeah.
is. So to me, that's not anything out of the ordinary,
Alarming.
but
Yeah.
something about that question for Heather hadn't sat right. So when she and Dent, her boyfriend, returned home the following morning, I guess, they started looking through the footage from the cameras that she had inside of her apartment.
Wait, I'm sorry. May I interrupt for just a moment?
Sure.
Did I just hear you say that something about that where's the melatonin question didn't sit right,
Yeah.
but she decided to wait many hours later to get home to assess.
Yes. Thank
So
you.
I didn't miss
Yeah.
that.
No, I
Okay.
have the same thought and touch on that. I was like,
Okay, that's also
okay,
rude.
yeah, yeah. So they're, looking through this footage, and Heather and Kevin allegedly found video of Roy sort of just anxiously walking around her apartment in his underwear, holding a knife and punching at the air while yelling at her 4-year-old son. This is allegedly what
Does this
what they
video
saw.
exist?
Yes, it does. But we'll get to it.
Oh, okay.
So, just like you said, when I was reading that, I was like, what the fuck? Because if you feel uneasy about the person who is watching your children, then maybe playing pool and drinking all fucking
Yes.
night shouldn't be your priority. You're like, we're gonna go home right now. I don't
Yeah.
know what's
You're
going
already
on,
in
but
the
I don't
car.
I don't like that. Yeah. Or pick up the phone and fucking ask why. Why do you need melatonin? So if you're concerned about your child's well-being, then go the fuck home. Don't stay out all night and continue leaving your child in a potentially dangerous situation. Like, I just don't get it. Later, Kevin Dent testified that he and Heather had been using methamphetamines that week, and that they had been using cocaine the night that they were out playing pool.
Fucking
So
A.
they were likely pretty amped up and paranoid, which I'm sure just added fuel to the shit fire.
Okay, so
So,
now we understand the relationship between Heather and Dent.
exactly. And I don't know her history completely, but like, her boyfriend obviously had been in prison and had a criminal record. She had some sort of like drug paraphernalia charge at some point, but it was dropped. But it seems like she's had an
Okay,
issue with drugs
so
throughout the
maybe
years.
Dent didn't introduce her to drugs, but he certainly was complicit in drug using.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So Heather stated that later that same day, after they'd watched this footage, that her 4-year-old son had come out of the bathroom naked, and she noticed that his genitals were swollen and bruised. So she asked if, someone had hurt him, and he told her that it was Roy. And so, this is where Heather immediately contacted police, showed them the video footage of Roy in her apartment, and took her son to be examined for possible abuse. No. Nope, nope, nope.
Oh,
That is
I
not what
was
fucking
like,
happened.
I misread Heather. I should be ashamed of myself.
That is not what
Not
fucking
what
happened.
happened. What
No,
fucking
not even
happened then?
close. So instead of doing the right thing and taking the proper channels, she told her boyfriend, Kevin Dent, about her speculations, and they decided that they would play detectives and crack the case themselves, like a couple of real gumshoes.
My
And
goodness.
so on the evening of July 31st, 2021, the day after Roy babysat Heather's boys, Heather sent a message to Roy, just kind of asking if he would come over to her apartment to discuss something with her. Without any hesitation, he headed over to her apartment, not suspecting that anything was wrong.
He's a good person.
Yeah. And to me, if you didn't do anything wrong, you're not going to suspect that something's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're not going to suspect that your super close friend is going to
Yeah, that's
be,
something,
yeah.
it could be
Oh
dangerous.
boy.
So when Roy got there, Heather's boyfriend Kevin was also there, and the couple confronted him about the suspected abuse. According to Heather and Kevin, Roy allegedly, and I will be using that word a lot, allegedly,
Allegedly.
yeah, told them that the 4-year-old boy was, quote, flirting with him, and that he, quote, tugged on his dick. A quote from Heather during future testimony.
So Heather alleged that Roy told her that the 4-year-old was flirting with him and that the 4-year-old tugged on
No,
Roy's.
that Roy tugged on the boy's genitals.
And she's saying, Heather's saying that Roy told her this.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
That he just openly admitted.
That's awful.
Unfortunately, Roy is no longer alive, to give his account of what happened that night. Um, but I do have a hard time believing that a man being accused of molesting a child while being confronted by multiple people would so freely admit to committing such a horrific act. But maybe he was just being honest about what happened. We'll never know. But I would like to
Mm,
note that none of the allegations of abuse by Roy have ever been substantiated.
okay. And I'm guessing his family is just beside themselves with
Yeah.
any suggestion. I bet you're going to get to it, but I'll tell you what, drugs change the whole dynamic.
When you get something in your mind, you are paranoid and you fucking run with it,
You
and
can't get it out of your mind.
you create a reality that isn't true. So, again,
Huck it, eh?
don't know what actually happened, but there's a lot of factors going on here. Following this alleged admission, Kevin Dent began beating Roy in the living room of Heather's apartment, and they ended up handcuffing Roy, so he was defenseless against the continued beating. I mean, he's obviously well trained in martial arts. He had done it since he was a teenager. He probably could have held his own, but they handcuffed him, so he couldn't. And Heather began recording videos on her cell
Oh,
phone
God.
of some of the assaults. And in one of the videos, her sons can be seen in the background walking into the room while Roy was being beat by Kevin.
Stop.
So
Oh, my.
it's such a twisted fucking way of thinking for them to want to protect the kids by punishing a potential child molester, but being okay with them watching Roy be mercilessly beaten in front of them. I can't with some of this. And so, again, following Roy's alleged confession, Heather still chose not to call police and report the abuse. Instead, she called her ex boyfriend, 37-year-old Brad Main, who lived in Pahrump, Nevada, which I love to say, which again is just outside of Las Vegas. So Heather told him that she had caught someone molesting her child. And I also, okay, so Brad Main is her ex boyfriend, but I didn't have any details on how long it had been since they were a couple. I don't know if it
Okay.
was before she had her sons, if it was after. Like, I don't know if he
Oh,
knew her boys. I don't know what the situation was.
okay.
So Heather told him that, she had caught someone molesting her child. And he was like, well, maybe you should call the police and report the assault. But she told him that they were beyond being able to involve the police.
What does that even
So
mean?
I think it's like, if the police show up, we're in trouble. So we
Because
can't go that
they
route.
already took matters into their own hands.
Right. It's like, we're going to be charged with assault. He just got out of fucking prison. Like, we can't call the police. The former couple created this master plan on what they were going to do with Roy Jaggers. So they decided that Heather and Kevin would take Roy to the Belle Vista shooting range, which was this like remote gun range in Pahrump where Brad Main would meet them. So Heather and her current boyfriend are taking Roy handcuffed and beaten to go meet her ex-boyfriend Brad to handle the situation.
Big happy family.
Yeah, right? And so Heather ended up also calling another friend of hers named Brandon Reinhardt to see if he could come watch her boys while they were gone. And she told Brandon, she's like, "Look, we have to go take care of a child molester that they had caught." And apparently her friend Brandon was like, "All right, buddy, no probs. I'll be right over. Happy to help." And so he came over, watched the boys while they take Roy's body to go do what they're going to do.
Well, at
It's
least she
fucking
didn't leave
crazy.
them unsupervised
Right? Or take them to
or take them
go
with.
witness all of this and
Right.
see someone that they might have cared about handcuffed. And
My God.
so Heather and Kevin then wrapped Roy's beaten body up on a tarp and a carpet and loaded them into her car.
Was he
And
still alive
they,
at this point?
yes, yeah, he was alive, but he was just beaten up and handcuffed. He couldn't do
Oh
anything
my God.
to fight them. And so then they drove to go meet Brad Main in Pahrump, which was about 25 miles from where they lived in Vegas. According to Heather and Kevin, the plan was simply to take Roy out to this remote area where Brad would intimidate and likely continue beating him. And then they were just going to leave him beaten and still handcuffed in the desert to try and somehow make his way back to Vegas. This was their grand fucking plan. But that is not what ended up happening. And what a fucked up plan, anyway. So Brad Main worked as a handyman. So his truck was generally filled with all kinds of tools, but he had apparently thought ahead and he grabbed some extra items before leaving for this fucking horrible meetup in the desert. And, the intention was to scare and torture Roy. So he also brought along a baton, a belt, an axe, some knives, a bayonet, a pistol, a stapler, and a fucking blowtorch. And as you can imagine by that stellar list, this is where things get really rough. So, this is a big trigger warning for extreme abuse and torture. Brad used the pistol that he brought to first fire some shots right next to Roy's ears. This was not only intended likely to, scare Roy, but also to disorient him.
Mhm.
I can't even imagine how bad that would hurt and just fuck with you. Brad then began beating Roy with a belt until the buckle broke off. He had one of those tools. I'm not really sure what they're called. They look like hammers, but like one side looks like a hammer and the other side looks like an axe. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he beat Roy multiple times in the face and the head
Oh
with
my
the
God.
handle side of that tool. So he just kind of
Okay.
like, beat him in the face. He then used a knife to mutilate Roy's penis and sodomized him with the bayonet, which of course ended up causing severe internal bleeding. And
Oh.
not satisfied with the amount of pain that they had inflicted, Brad then used the blowtorch to burn his genitals and other parts of his body. So this vigilante trio spent hours in the desert torturing Roy with the tools that he had in his truck. So their plan to just rough him up and leave him to find his way home obviously escalated like significantly.
Yeah, that went from 0 to 1,000.
Still alive, they
Oh my
wrapped Roy
God.
up in the tarp again tied it with a rope, and they placed Roy back in Heather's vehicle. And they made a stop at Brad's house where he grabbed a shotgun to add to his torture arsenal. And then they drove out to the secluded Cathedral Canyon, this peaceful place that I had talked about. They removed Roy from the vehicle and took the tarp off that he'd been, wrapped up in. At this point, he is suffering from massive internal and external
Mm-hmm.
injuries, but his three accusers didn't seem to let up on their punishment. While they were standing at the top of a cliff in the canyon, Brad made Heather remove all of Roy's clothing, where he was forced to stand naked and shivering in the cold. Brad then grabbed his shotgun and told Roy to start walking until there was nowhere else to go but down. According to Heather, once they reached the end of the cliff, Brad asked Roy again if he had hurt Heather's son, but before he could even respond, Brad kicked Roy backwards off of the 30-foot cliff. Somehow the fall wasn't enough to kill Roy, who was
Holy
already
shit.
severely injured. Yeah, and he began trying to run away after hitting the ground in the gorge below. This guy was fucking tough, and he was determined to live, which just, breaks me. Unfortunately, he couldn't survive the shotgun blasts that Brad fired at him after he got to his feet. So, after being shot multiple times, these assholes left him there to die alone from the numerous injuries that he had sustained throughout that long night. Around 5:30 that morning, Brad Main made a frantic call to a coworker of his named Norman Mullet, and Brad asked him to meet him at his house, where he allegedly told him, like, we caught a child molester and wanted to teach him a lesson. Like, we beat the crap out of him, but I think we've gone too far. Like, that's what Brad told him. And he told his friend that Roy was still alive in the canyon and was just badly injured. So Brad and his friend Norman then drove out into the desert toward Cathedral Canyon. And so Norman later testified that he was under the assumption that Roy was alive and that Brad just needed his help finding Roy and getting him the assistance that he needed to treat his injuries. On their way out to Cathedral Canyon, they ended up pulling off the road at some point where Kevin and Heather were waiting for them. Heather stayed in her car during this encounter, but Kevin got into Brad's truck and the three men continued to drive back to the canyon. So they walked to the cliff where Roy had been pushed off, and Norman Mullet agreed to kind of keep a lookout at the top of the cliff while Brad and Kevin walked down to the bottom of the canyon to try and find Roy and get him help. Once they got to him, though, it was clear that Roy had not survived the injuries that they had inflicted. And these two idiots just began arguing then about what they should do with his body. So how they thought that he would have survived the horrendous shit that they did to him is a mystery to me. But apparently they were shocked and didn't know what to do. And so this is when Norman Mullet noticed a man walk up and look down from the cliff to see what was going on down below, which I'm sure he was like, what the where the fuck did you come from? This mystery man was Michael Ward, the man that I had
Ah.
mentioned at the beginning, who had been camping in Cathedral Canyon. He'd heard a commotion and went to investigate. As he is, picking up his phone and starting to make the phone call to 911 to report what's happening in front of him, Mullet like alerts down this cliff to Kevin and Brad and is like, hey guys, we got to get the fuck out of here. This guy's showed up out of nowhere. And so the three men ran out of the canyon back to where Brad's truck was parked and they just got the fuck out of there, leaving poor Michael Ward to contact authorities and report the horrific shit that he had just seen. Once he was back home in Pahrump, Brad handed Norman Mullet, his friend, some trash bags out of his truck and a shotgun, and he was like, "Hey, can you get rid of this gun for me?" And Norman Mullet was like, "Uh, I just got released from prison, so I'm not going back and getting locked up again for handling a weapon that was likely used during a crime." So he was like, "Fuck that, I'm not taking your gun."
Let me get this straight. Just got released from prison. He doesn't want to go
Mhm.
back. Just went and saw a really fucking bloody and battered dead guy. And now his friend's asking him to get rid of a shotgun. And he's like, hey, man, I don't want to go back to prison.
Yeah.
But cool, you live your life. Like, you do you with whatever shotgun and killing people you want to do. But I don't want to go back to prison, so I'm not going to touch the gun. That's where he draws the line.
Yeah, he was like,
Okay.
"No, I'm out." He did, however, agree to take a toolbox from Brad's truck that Brad had asked him to keep safe,
Hmm.
and he did end up throwing away the trash bags that he had given him in just like a random dumpster.
Well, now he's complicit.
So he was a little
What an
involved.
idiot.
And he would later learn that the toolbox that he had taken contained the tools and the other items that were used to torture Roy Jaggers throughout that night.
Fuck.
If you knew that your friend just murdered somebody and they're like, "Hey, can you throw this away for me, bro?" It wasn't like a Wendy's bag with 8 fries in the bottom. What do you think's in these trash bags, bro? Like, come on.
Evidence.
So, Nye County Sheriff's deputies were obviously dispatched to the scene where they found a distraught Michael Ward who his little respite in nature has been just fucking
Poor guy.
annihilated.
Yeah.
And so he, like, when the deputies get there, he immediately just started yelling at one of them and was like, "There's a body down here." So the officer walked down the canyon and confirmed that Roy Jaggers was unfortunately deceased and, protected the area until detectives and crime scene investigators could arrive. According to arrest reports, Roy suffered injuries to his right hand and legs, stab wounds, burn wounds, gunshot wounds, and blunt force trauma to his head. A medical examiner with the Clark County Coroner's Office later testified that they found more than 30 gunshot fragments in Roy's body. Like, they brutalized him. After the body was identified as being Roy's, detectives went to speak with his mother, Catherine, who went by Cassie, and she was able to tell them that the last time she had seen her son, he was leaving their apartment to go see his friend and their neighbor, Heather Pate. So it really didn't take long for
Mm.
investigators to go speak with Heather. A warrant was then issued to search her car and her apartment. Based on the evidence that they found, Heather was arrested for Roy's murder, and then her boyfriend, Kevin Dent, and ex boyfriend, Brad Main, were also both arrested. And this was all within 36 hours of Roy's body being discovered. So the investigation moved quickly. I mean, obviously, with the extensive injuries that Roy sustained, I'm assuming that it didn't take long for investigators to find blood or other incriminating evidence in Heather's apartment and her car, Brad's car, probably just all over the fucking place. So, this trio, who were in the worst threesome of all time, were held without bail and charged with murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and battery with substantial bodily harm. During a preliminary hearing for the three suspects on September 30th of 2021, Michael Ward and Norman Mullet both gave their testimony about what they had witnessed the morning that Roy was brutally attacked and killed. Norman stated that he was really pissed off when they arrived at the canyon because he'd been told that Roy was alive. But, when they got there, it was obvious that he had been murdered. And so then he's just like involved in a crime all of a sudden. Um, he also recounted the trash and toolbox that I mentioned that, Brad had asked him to take care of for him. Michael Ward stated that when he saw Brad Main standing over Roy's body, he, quote, seemed proud of what he'd done, and
Mm,
he smiled like he had done something good.
fucking knew it.
Brandon Reinhardt, who Heather had called the night of the murder to watch her boys because of an emergency, also testified, and he stated that when he got to her apartment that night, that Roy Jaggers was lying handcuffed on the floor, and he remembered that one of his ears was really swollen, that it was obvious that, like, just from the little bit of that he could see, that he had been beaten pretty badly.
Wow.
Roy's mother, Cassie, also spoke during the hearing. And just to add to the fucking tragedy of, like, so horribly losing her son in a horrible mistake by the prosecution, during her testimony, she was handed a photograph of her son's beaten body.
Oh my God.
The prosecution thought that she had already been shown the photo, but in front of a room full of people, she, for the very first time, was witnessing the full effect of the brutality committed against her son.
Wow.
Obviously, completely devastated. She just said, like, that's my baby. And she ended up, I mean, she was like dry heaving, like they had to take a break. And it's just gut wrenching
Oh my
watching
God.
her try to absorb the reality of what had happened to her child. And I'm not sure why the prosecution chose that photo, but it, I mean, seems kind of senseless and something that will haunt her forever.
She'll never unsee that image.
Yeah, it was just like, what the fuck? And like they were so close. Like, she and Roy were so close. Like, she was talking about how he used to just like come in and like sit at the end of her bed, and they would just talk forever, like about just their days or whatever. And she was like, I miss that so much. And
God.
like, so the fact that she went through all that is just it's horrifying. In 2023, Heather Pate and Kevin Dent took plea deals with the Nye County District Attorney's Office and agreed to testify against Brad Main during his trial.
Oh,
So they pled
interesting.
guilty, and then he pled
But
not
didn't
guilty
they
and ended up going
orchestrate
to
it
trial.
themselves and then bring Brad into it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
But they're a bunch of shitbags. There's a bunch of
exactly.
shitbags here.
It is shitbag central. As part of their deals, Heather Pate pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping, and Kevin Dent pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. And there was a lot of finger pointing happening at Brad Main's trial, which began in May of 2023. Two of his friends, who were a married couple, testified that he brought a shotgun to their house on August 1st of 2021, the day that Roy was killed. And he was like, "Hey, I'm just going to leave this gun in your garage, just so it's safe, aka wouldn't be located by investigators."
Wow.
The gun was confirmed to be the weapon that was used to shoot and kill Roy, because those shots were actually what was
Caused his
determined
death.
to be his cause of death. So, way to go,
So
dummy. Your gun was found.
had he not been shot, would he have survived all of that torture?
I mean, it's hard to say. He was 20, like out in the middle of fucking nowhere. I'm assuming he probably would have succumbed to his
Mm.
injuries unless he happened to make it to a road and see someone that could get him help. Like, I mean, there was a chance, but the idea for them was to get him to a very remote area where
So
he
he didn't
couldn't.
have a chance. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But
Wow.
yeah, I mean, if he Michael Ward walked up and witnessed the whole thing, if he'd still been alive, there would have been his help right there. So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
During the trial, Heather and Kevin both testified that the plan was just to scare and torture Roy. Like, the plan was just to torture him. Jesus Christ. But that Brad was the one who escalated the violence that led to his death. But Brad also testified during his own trial that Heather was the mastermind behind the whole attack, and that Kevin was the one who committed most of the torturous acts on Roy. So it was just a bunch of like, no, he did it, she did it, he did it, whatever. Y'all were fucking there. Y'all could have stopped it. Fuck off.
Yeah.
So, according to the video evidence that I had mentioned before, that was presented during the trial of interviews following the arrests, detectives had told Brad Main after he was arrested and was in custody, they informed him that the video surveillance from Heather's apartment showed the two boys playing on the couch while Roy moved around the apartment in his boxers. Why? I don't know. Maybe he spilled something and was washing his clothes. Maybe they were getting ready to go to bed and that's what he was going to sleep in. I mean, if they were out until 5 in the fucking morning, at some point they're all going to go to sleep, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So, don't know why, but there was no sign of any sort of abuse, of him yelling at Heather's son that she had indicated. None of that. These detectives were telling Brad Main, like, look, the footage that Heather was basing all of her accusations on didn't show any sort of abuse whatsoever. They were like, did you watch the video? And he was like, no, they never showed it to me. He had just taken Heather at her word.
Wow.
That's why I said alleged 1,000 times. I personally don't believe that Roy did anything to those kids, but take care of them. It was also confirmed during this trial that Maine had been sexually abused by his stepfather as a child. So I'm no expert, but it seems to me that having two people who are on drugs and a third who was likely carrying around years of pain and resentment, wanting to punish someone for the abuse that he had experienced as a child, just led to chaos and disaster.
It's like a powder keg.
Exactly. And so, despite his best efforts to minimize his responsibility in Roy's death to the jury, 39-year-old Brad Main was found guilty of first-degree murder with a deadly weapon and kidnapping with a deadly weapon following a trial that lasted about a week. And the jury only deliberated for about 2 hours. So
Oh, okay.
it was
Pretty
quick,
cut and
yeah.
dry.
Yeah. And the prosecution had initially considered the death penalty for him, but the Nye County District Attorney Chris Arabia stated that, quote, this is something that would take decades and cost Nye County millions of dollars. There is a high emotional cost to the survivors and a big economic cost to the county. So Maine was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 37-year
Okay.
old Kevin Dent was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 10 years in prison.
That's it?
Yeah. And Heather Pate, who was now 29, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I don't like that they got plea deals. I mean, they're the two that initiated the violence against Roy instead of calling police to report any suspected abuse against the kids. They could have let him leave Heather's apartment after roughing him up, but they didn't. And the whole, like, let's rough him up and teach him a lesson idea is bullshit. They took things way too far out of the gate for that to be believable to me. I think that
Yeah.
they had every intention of torturing the shit out of him that night. You don't handcuff someone, beat the absolute shit out of them, torture them, take them to the middle of the desert and leave them and just assume that they'll make it back okay and that lesson learned, like you're not going to do it again. Like that's horseshit. They chose to involve Brad because they wanted to instill further abuse on Roy. And while I believe that Brad did the majority of the torturing and seemed to unfortunately enjoy doing it, they are all equally responsible for his death. Any of them could have chosen to stop things and let Roy go or get him help, but they didn't. And like the three of them continued torturing him and they all let it happen. Like there's just no getting around it. There's no excuses. And maybe Heather was the mastermind behind the whole thing. She's certainly the one who jumped to conclusions and got this incredibly violent ball rolling involving these other two violent individuals who would do this dirty work for her. And I just don't think that there's a severe enough punishment for what the three of them did that night. As I've said multiple times, police never found any evidence that Roy Jaggers hurt either of Heather Pate's children. And regardless if he hurt them or not, the proper actions were not taken. If Heather suspected that Roy had hurt her child, she should have contacted police and reported the alleged abuse, not taken the law into her own hands. And I know that our judicial system is fucked up and that guilty people often fall through the cracks, but without a proper investigation and actual evidence of a crime being committed, justice just wasn't served here. If Roy was guilty of molesting Heather's son, then he absolutely should have served the maximum sentence for that crime. But it's hard to feel like those accusations weren't made prematurely and without proof, and that an innocent man who was simply helping a friend was beaten, tortured, and viciously murdered for nothing. And that to me is so fucking scary.
I can't believe I've never heard this case. The sense of betrayal he must have had. He knew who.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I can't
I
even just.
and the fact that she called him and was like, "Hey, can you come over?" And he was like, "Yeah." And that's where I have a hard time. If you knew that you did something, I'm sure he
Yeah.
probably knew that there were cameras in that apartment. You wouldn't
Yeah.
just
That's a
go
good
over there and
point.
be like, "What's up, guys?" You know?
Was there medical records proving that she had taken her little one to the hospital?
No.
And okay, so they weren't able to substantiate that at all.
Mm-mm.
So the likelihood of any abuse ever is minimal. Ugh.
I know that an investigation was looked into for the abuse, so I'm sure that those boys were talked to by psychologists.
Doctors who are trained to assess if there's child abuse in young children, they're very skilled. They're trained. Like
Yeah.
there's like a multitude of red flags that they look for. And if none of those flags were even, you know what I mean? It's not even like
Yeah.
there was reporting that there was alleged child abuse and there was some indicators that perhaps maybe there was something going on, but they couldn't truly fully substantiate. It wasn't even that. There literally was nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. This is Vegas. They had resources. They have trained professionals that were
Yeah.
able to speak to these kids. It's not like it
Yeah.
was middle of fucking nowhere where they have one deputy on duty all the time and he's like, I don't think it happened.
Yeah.
This was like a solid investigation and they couldn't find anything. Like, I think that she was paranoid and just assumed something happened. I don't know.
Because there's no other motive.
No. In an interview, Roy's mother Cassie said, quote, "My son, and this was the only thing I could say to myself to keep myself sane, is my son was put on this earth for a reason, and his task on this earth was to get those three people off the streets." And
Oh my gosh, that just gave me
right?
fucking shivers.
And I think that we can be all grateful that they are, because I don't know how you could be involved in any of the shit that went down that night and not be a fucking monster. But yeah, the fact that that's how she's gotten herself through the trauma of losing her son is
Yeah.
to be able to look at him as like he's the hero that got these fucking dirtbags off the street.
And saved who knows how many other lives.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Isn't
love
that
that.
ah so, but that is the case of the just horrific torture and killing of Roy Jaggers, who to me seems like a fantastic, kind, gentle
Human.
soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we sure
Who
need a lot more of that in this world.
exactly.
He was so young, too. Like his whole
Yeah,
life.
27. Yeah, and he just wanted to like fall in love and be just share his
Breaks
life
my
with
heart.
somebody. He was really into martial arts and had started teaching kids martial arts, and so he was like getting more into that. It's like he could have impacted a lot of young people and a lot of other lives, and they just fucking stole that, and I makes me really sad.
I want to honor his memory. Like, he died a senseless, tragic, fucking horribly frightening and painful death.
Yeah, it sucks to know that two of them might be back on the
I
streets
know.
in 10 to 15 years, and
I'm going to go with silver lining. Maybe in prison, they will kick their meth addiction and actually be clean so that when they do get out, Heather can be reunited with her boys if that's what is allowed and makes sense. I just hope that uh, they're given this chance of parole, and there's no guarantee, right? Their parole could be denied.
yeah.
But if they are let out, I really hope that they use this second chance for good. And especially with Heather, as a mom, like her sole purpose in prison should just be how can I be there as much as I can for my kids, in my opinion.
Yeah. And one thing that makes me really fucking sad about, I mean, there's like a 11 gajillion things that make me sad
Wait,
about
what?
this case.
It was what? 11D
Ele-
gajillion?
yeah, it's a lot.
I'm obsessed.
Those boys probably really loved Roy.
They probably did.
And I bet that they were like, oh, Roy's going to come hang out with us tonight. You know what I mean? And he, again, assuming that no abuse happened and nothing wrong was happening, he was probably one of the bright spots of their little worlds. She wouldn't have left her kids with them, hopefully, with him if they didn't
I
like
don't
being
know.
around him.
I don't know.
It's hard to
She
say.
was she
Yeah.
was addicted to drugs. That I
Yeah.
understand now why she got home at 5 a.m. because she was just fucking whacked out of her
But like
mind.
according to Roy's mom, Roy and the boys had a really good relationship. Like he really liked being around them, and I assume that that only goes. I don't love kids that hate being around me. Like if they don't want to be around me, I'm
You're
like, all
right.
right, fuck
Yeah.
you then. You
Like
know what I
fuck you
mean?
too. Yeah, that's true. You're right. One could infer that they had a good relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like it was mutual. Maybe not, but it didn't seem like in the actual video, according to detectives, that those boys were like in any sort of distress. They were just in a comfortable situation with a guy that had watched them multiple times.
Do you think that if drugs weren't involved that any of this would have happened?
Probably not, no. I mean, I don't know, but I think that it amplified that situation and it just was like a snowball that got out of control. And that I'm assuming their paranoia and just being amped up and focusing on that and just they spun out of control.
Yeah.
And then
Fuck.
I don't know how to explain Brad Main. He just had some resentment and some
I
anger that he needed
guess.
to work out.
Well, Hugh said that he was sexually
Fuck, who
abused as
knows?
a child. I mean,
Yeah,
you represent all that that big, heavy, wet blanket of burden that I've carried my entire life.
exactly.
You
Exactly.
represent that. So I'm going to take that out on you.
Yeah. And that's just an assumption, but it seems
Yeah, of course. Pure
pretty
speculation.
clear. Yeah, but it seems like an obvious leap to make in this
Wow.
situation.
Well, if you liked this episode, everyone, please share it with friends, family, strangers, anyone, really.
Yeah. You can tell everyone
Fucking
about it.
share. Yeah, tell everybody.
But we appreciate you guys and we thank you and we love you for listening. And with that, goodbye, Carrie.
Goodbye, my dear James. If you're happy and you know it, it's your meds.
That's a fact.
We're going to walk to Dairy Queen. Okay.
All right. Here we go. Spit pistol, carry down.
I repeat, engage, engage.
If I was a betting man.
That is correct.
What am I missing? That's hot. So sexy.